Commissioner Sullivan. Welcome, everybody. It's 1 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and call today's workshop to order. It is 1:01 p.m. on December 18th, 2023. If you would please stand as we pledge the flag. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Also, please join us as we take a moment of silence and break for a few seconds of individual prayer, reflection, or meditation. We take this time to honor and remember first responders and our men and women in the military who keep us safe locally and protect our freedoms at home and abroad. Their commitment inspires us all. Thank you. All right, we've got a few items that we're going to try and get through today. Should leave us plenty of time to break before the meeting tonight. But first on the agenda is going to be our canvassing board appointment discussion. And Ms. Petito, did you want to lead that or?
I can certainly start. This item has been discussed previously at the board's meeting, probably going back to the last two where it's been discussed. And we wanted to bring this back based on the consensus of the board at that time to have a further discussion or examination about the appointee that we have sitting on the canvassing, or I'm sorry, this is the canvassing board. This is for we did have a discussion about this one for committee assignments and who was going to represent the county at the canvassing board. We do have a couple options or suggestions, I guess, at staff level that we wanted to bring back to the board. I think when we left off with this, had Commissioner Pennington or Vice Chair Pennington serving as the primary with Commissioner Sullivan as the alternate. Due to the commitment and the overlap of certain meetings, we wanted to bring it back. In the past, we have had somebody from the public represent or be the appointee, I should say, for the chair. We did want to offer that we have a staff member that you're familiar with, Holly Albanese from administration, who is willing to serve in some capacity, whether it's as a primary or an alternate on the canvassing board. So we just wanted to bring this back to you for your consideration. How did you want to move forward? So that would actually give you 3 people to choose from.
Right. So as I recall, Ms. Pennington's commitments were such that being primary for the entirety was not going to work out. And
yeah, that's right. I got the schedule from Katie's office, and it's 2 primaries and a general, and it's a longer. It's at least 30 meetings, something like that, 28 to 30, and they're more than an hour each at some point. So, I unable to commit to that time due to my other employment and being on the commission.
And Mr. Sullivan, you wanted to speak to that?
Yeah, just briefly, first as an introduction, I feel very strongly as an elected Board of County Commissioners member that the canvassing board is basically 3 people, the supervisor of elections, a judge, and 1 member from our board here. I feel it's important for that to continue. I appreciate the staff being willing to help, and there still may be a need for that. But if it comes down to that somebody from the board needs to be chair, then I would be willing to do it. I'm at the end of my time, and so I've done it a couple of times before. And so if Katie thinks that I can still do it, then I'd be willing to do it as chair. And then I think we ought to pick 2 people to be backup. You know, there are more and more people in the county now voting. And if you've gone through the election here in the last, I know Greg, you went through it, and the population of voters and the details and all the rules that the state has put together. So I think it's important, one of the things when you sign up to be a commissioner, that we continue to do that, provided we have somebody who can do it. So I'd be willing to be chair, but I also think that maybe we ought to, I don't know what Katie is here, says about this, but can we designate, say, 2 people? For instance, Leanne, if you're the alternate, you could still have problems with meetings.
That's
And
right.
so maybe have a staff member as an alternate to cover that, and that way we'd be solid about it. So that was my thoughts.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'd be willing to, I'm going to, even though I'm still filed as a candidate for the State House, I'm going to be withdrawing my filing, so I'm not going to be an active candidate here and by the end of the month probably, or in January. So, you know, I'd be willing to serve as alternate to Commissioner Sullivan if that was the pleasure of the commission to help out.
So I guess, Ms. Lenhart, would you answer a question for me? Can we bring
Mhm.
the supervisor up? And I know you've said that it's important to have an elected official in the position, but what's the opinion of 2 alternates if they've received the right training up to that point, depending on who can fill the spot?
Right. Okay. Well, good afternoon, Board. Katie Linhart, Supervisor of Elections. It is common for counties to appoint more than 1 alternate. And in fact, the law was recently changed to allow it. So additional alternates beyond that. And Sean and I have discussed that new legislative change. So sure, if Donnie wants to be alternate and would accept, it's not really chair because the judge is always chair.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a member.
No, I know, it's just a
Yeah.
word. I know,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
but I have to clarify. So as primary, the member, it would really be the canvassing board member appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and then 2 alternates from the board would be, I mean, it's really inappropriate for me to say, I want this person on the canvassing board. But I mean, if you're asking me questions, it would be appropriate. And I think having commissioners instead of members of the public, I mean, you know, and there may be a case in the future where all commissioners are not able to serve. And that's why in the statutes, there are, you know, those alternatives other than elected officials on the canvassing board, even for judges. So there's always that option to have an alternate or even a substitute member.
So is that my appointment then as chair? Or is just Commissioner Sullivan nominating himself? Does that qualify if like we did committees?
So the Board of County Commission, the board as a whole appoints your substitute, and it sounds like Mr. Sullivan is volunteering for
Okay.
that. And then you, Mr. Chair, appoint the alternates.
Okay. So based on the discussion, if you would still be an alternate, we'll have 2 alternates, Miss Commissioner Pennington and Commissioner O'Brien. Great. Thank you for being here
Of course,
to answer those
anytime.
questions.
And we have signature training now that's available from the Department of State. There's a canvassing board workshop that's always done prior to an election. That's now online. And yours truly was able to, well, they asked me to teach one of the courses, so I'm actually in there. It's one
So
of
we're
the-
not going to Orlando?
I'm an instructor. It's pretty
No-
fun.
No trip
No.
to Orlando?
No trip to Orlando. Isn't that great? You don't have to go anywhere. You can watch it at your convenience, pause and stop whenever you need to. It's about 4 hours long total. So it's kind of the same amount of training that you would have gotten in person anyway, but you have the convenience of doing it, you know, when you have time. And then also we're having additional signature verification training for my staff, and it's available for commission, whoever it is on the canvassing board and the judges as well. And that's on January 19th. So I'll send those dates and all that information to you later.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so that solves that item. Appreciate everybody. Mr. Sullivan, thank you.
That's fine.
You continue to provide excellent service to the county, and I appreciate
the
you
area.
doing that. All right, we will move on to our budget discussion, 24-25 budget discussion. Ms. Petito?
Good afternoon. As you recall, we had started the discussion probably a couple weeks ago when we were looking at what we refer to as the book, but kind of that financial plan. And let me see if I can get this to advance. Looking at the financial planning of how do you move the county forward. So what we wanted to do today was kind of high level, really start the budget process early, where we're going to talk about the strategic plan. As you recall, last year was the first year that we implemented the plan, so we wanted to give you an overview of where we're at with that, but we also wanted to talk to you about some of those ARPA or the American Rescue Plan Act funded projects. We haven't really come back to you as a whole to really give you an update on where we're at with that. There is some funding there, and we will talk about it, where you have some money left over on projects that have completed that we're going to have to appropriate into another use that is compatible with the intended final rule. We wanted to talk to you a little bit about affordable housing initiative. It is tied to the strategic plan. It is in support of our AHAC, excuse me, or our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. And then we wanted to talk to the board about establishing early on in this process the board's policies and funding priorities as we start to work on fiscal year 25's budget. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the strategic plan. And as I mentioned before, these are the 4 pillars of the strategic plan. And so now that we've completed that first full year, we wanted to come back and provide to you an update. I believe a document was sent out at the end of last week. A copy may have been provided to you today at your seat, but we wanted to go over this kind of high level as we close out fiscal year 23 so that we can discuss any items or changes if the board deems necessary for next fiscal year. So I'm going to hand this next piece off to Jorge. He's internally the one that's been managing this at the county level, making sure that it's in there. Do you want this one?
Chair, Commissioners. So the strategic plan has in total 15 goals, 63 objectives, and 119 measures. We also extracted a lot of the measures and actually placed them in the dashboard that we have at flaglercounty.com/data. So the strategic plan covers it's incorporated into 4 focus areas. And I'll be covering those. Effective government is the first focus area, and goal 1 is maintain financial stability. As you can see, we have 3 that meet or exceed the measure for this fiscal year 23. We have 2 that are not meeting. Basically, these are the ones related to reserves, having the reserves at a point that was established by the board. And some of these have been coming down as the year progresses. So that's how we ended the year for FY23. The ones that are in yellow is that there's some caution. It hasn't met that target yet, but it's still progressing. And the ones that are in blue are ones that we don't have an update or is an item or a measure that is going to be worked throughout the year because this is a 5-year plan. So goal 3 for effective government is provide an excellent customer experience. Some of these are still being worked on. For example, creating a survey that will be working with the city of Palm Coast. And that will be a survey going out to the entire community and trying to get that information back so we can actually work on some of the items that our residents have the desire for us to work on. And the last one here, 3.5.1, is meeting or exceeding because we actually have created the dashboard and it's actually deployed and being used as we speak.
Kind of skipped over number 2, goal 2. You went from 1 to 3. I didn't know.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so number 2 in effective government, and goal number 2 is build and maintain a relationship to support effective and efficient government. All those are meeting or exceeding. Those are related to different meetings that we have and there are different groups that we work with our government, local government partners. Goal number 4 is create a culture of performance excellence. We have some of these items are going to be worked on throughout the year. Moving on to FY24, we have 3 that are meeting or exceeding expectations. One thing that I forgot to mention at the beginning is that the directors for each of these departments, where it says lead, if you have any particular question about these items as I go through, we can address those or provide an answer to you as we move forward. The second focus area is economic vitality, and goal 1 for that is diversify and enhance the tax base to improve the local economy. Here we have 3 measures that are meeting or exceeding. We have 1 that is caution or yellow. They're making some progress, but it's not met completely that measure. And we have 3 that are don't have an update or will be moving forward to the next year. Goal 2 is to develop a competitive advantage to new and existing businesses. Here, the majority are meeting or exceeding with 3 items that are just continue to work on and we'll continue to work on moving forward on FY24.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the difference between the yellow sideways arrows and the blue, because it sounds like they're both being worked on, but explain the difference.
Yeah, the ones in yellow are actually worked on. There's some progress being made, but it doesn't get to the point that we can call it meeting or exceeding. The ones in blue is that there's an update at all, or it hasn't started as a measure that we're working on.
Okay.
Goal 3 under economic vitality is promote and market Flagler County as a desirable place to live, work, and visit. Here, 2 of the measures are meeting or exceeding, and 1 is as a caution or yellow, continue to work on. Goal 4 is explore affordable workforce and attainable housing options. We have 3 that don't have update. As you can see, and these particular ones, they're scheduled to be worked on as originally approved, FY24 Q2 and FY25 Q4. So those will move on to the next year, and we'll track them in the dashboard as well. The bottom 2 are meeting or exceeding the measurement target. The third focus area is growth and infrastructure. The first goal is to provide quality, fundamental infrastructure and assets. The majority of the measures here within this goal are meeting or exceeding. We have 3 measures that are going to be moving forward to the next year. They're in blue. Goal 2 under the same focus area is protect and manage natural resources. Here we have 4 that are meeting or exceeding, 3 that are moving on to the next fiscal year, and 5 that are under caution. Works have been made, but not sufficiently to call it meet or exceed at this time. Goal 3 is preserve and enhance cultural, recreational, and leisure activities. 2 of these have meet or exceeded. 1 is a caution, and 1 is no update at this time. The 4th focus area is public health and safety. Goal 1 is to increase resident awareness and service availability of the Health and Human Services Department. All 3 measures under this goal are green for FY23. Goal 2 under the same focus area is operate a risk reduction program. We have 4 that are meeting or exceeding, 2 that are caution, just continue to make progress, 1 that is not meeting or exceeding at this time, and 3 that are no update. Goal 3 is improve public safety response and service delivery capabilities. The majority of the measures here in this particular goal are green, they're meeting or exceeding, with 7 that are with no updates. They'll be moving, as you can see, in FY 26, 24, 25, and 26. And we have 1 that is a caution, and then 1 that is not, did not meet the measurement for this particular year. Now I'll open it up for any questions you might have on the strategic plan.
Anybody on the commission have a question for Mr. Salinas?
Just one thought I didn't see mentioned in here now, and it's kind of in the this FC3 Flagler County Cultural Council, which is part of our arts strategic plan. We have made progress in that. It's the only thing I was thinking, but it's not specifically mentioned here. And I thought maybe back in that area where we mentioned Old Brick Road improvements, that maybe it would something along that would fit in there. Just a thought. But we have made some good progress, and we are spending money on that. And other arts things in the city have been, going away, and we're now the primary on that. So I would like to see somehow to get that someplace in the overall strategic plan.
Yeah, so we'll have an opportunity to update the strategic plan if there's any changes that you would like to add, so we can approve the strategic plan for this coming year. And these items, the commissioners have an opportunity to add or remove or change any of these measures that you would like, so we can actually then have a focus for FY24. But Commissioner Sullivan, if that's one you would like to add, we can certainly add it to our-
FC3, just
FC3,
something on
okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, I had a
Yes, sir.
question. So, and this might be for Heidi or for you, Ray. What steps are you taking from a leadership standpoint to drive this process down focus-wise and changing the culture throughout the organization? Like, do you require that these goals get discussed at staff meetings? Do you do regular updates? You're communicating a lot with us about your progress and things that you're doing in it. And, like I know we tie it back in every one of our agenda items, we tie back to the strategic plan. But I'm just curious, what you're doing from a staff level to drive the process.
So during our regular department head meeting, we have conversations. Heidi has placed it on the agenda for various meetings, and we actually follow up with the directors and give them their measurements for them to provide an update to us. And then we populate this particular document, we populate our dashboard, but it happens on a regular basis. Specifically on the dashboard, every quarter, we get information from the directors and we update the dashboard. And that's the plan moving forward, to continue to update it on a quarterly basis.
Yeah, so I think what stands out most is under effective government. One of the first pages is that we're having difficulty hitting our target on operating reserves and the 3/12 fund, right? So that's like
Correct.
the key, most important thing. So I think just following back with what Commissioner O'Brien said, what are we doing with staff to say, it's just as much, not just the board, but them as well. How do we get a reduction to where we are in their department budgets, to where we are starting to see are they being led to look for efficiencies in their budget, to give back at the end of the year in their budget? Have we looked at doing any type of a one-time incentive program for those who don't spend all of their budget? Have we looked at giving merit increases to those who are able to look for efficiencies within their budget? Because that, to me, it would be very important to help us get back into, into the 3/12s and having reserves is for the department, but also recognizing that I mean, it's the government, we give money and everybody wants to spend their cut, but how do we incentivize our people to say, because the state does it. The state has a great incentive program. You find an efficiency, your department's getting, a one-time incentive for finding that efficiency to help us save. So where are we at maybe talking to the departments, about creating efficiency, and saving us money at the end of the year in their budget?
Yeah, I know there've been conversations in some of the committees. I don't know if Heidi wants to mention something.
Yeah, I've, where I worked from previously, and we've had this conversation with the financial services folks as well as some of the internal leadership. Where I came from in South Florida, they used to have something called gain sharing, where if you came up with an idea or an initiative that saved money, they would take a percentage of the savings, but it was citywide, and they would share those savings with all employees, not one specific department, because a lot of times the things that you were coming up with, they're cross-departmental initiatives. So it's not necessarily fair to recognize one when it takes everybody together working, together to create those savings. When we originally looked at it, because we talked about it actually last year, there was internal conversation with whether or not it was legal, whether or not you could continue to do that. We talked about the creation of some sort of incentive to employees for the way of compensating them. Right now, our employees only receive a cost of living adjustment. We only have one employee, which is the county attorney, that actually receives a merit increase. No other county employee receives a merit increase. So how do you effectively stop the compression within our county employees when they're receiving a COLA? And so now as you're hiring new people that are coming into the organization, they're making pretty much the same as the person who's been here if you're only giving them COLA. We talked about, different strategies on how do you incentivize the people. And we talked about doing maybe an inverted form of compensation where maybe it's a dollar amount. It's not percentage driven, because naturally the higher the salary, the more you would take in if it was just strictly percentage, like cost of living adjustments are. But looking at different options for how do you become more efficient, more effective, and how do you reward the people on the bottom end? Because typically they're the ones that are suffering the most when you're looking at, the cost of inflation and things like that. So we've been talking about it for the last couple years. I don't mean this in a bad way, and I don't know any other way to say it, but just to say it. There's a lot of challenges and a lot of issues internally that we have as employees that are from, prior administration, not the last administration, but the previous administration, that we're still playing catch up on. When I ended up taking over this position a couple years ago, we were probably offset somewhere about $3 million, close to $3.5 million when you look at salaries of entire county staff. And it's because we have not had merit increases for the majority of my time here. So I'd say 15 years plus, the county has not had merit increases. We've been given adjustments because we've done salary surveys to try to be competitive. But it's a huge challenge. Some of those were due to collective bargaining agreements for fire rescue, but largely it's the rest of the employees. So, when you look at the board side, and I think when we're looking at creating the budget, our budget on the board side has only gone up, if I remember correctly, I want to say it was like 9%, where some of the other budgets that the board is responsible for have gone up 14%. So I don't know if it's necessarily an issue, a spending issue on the board side. When you look at our staffing has not grown. When you look at the percentage, I think it was part of the book, but when you look at the percentage of FTEs to resident, our employee count has actually gone down. So I think we're operating at the highest level of efficiencies. I'm not saying there's not room for improvement. I think there always is. But internally, I know with our leadership, executive leadership, department head level, we're always looking for ways, how do you do things better? And it shouldn't be just during the budget period, it ought to be year round, where I believe in continuous quality improvement. And how do you look at what we do, not from a government perspective of, well, it's the government, we get the money, and so we're going to spend it. How do you look at everything that we're doing and make sure that it's the most cost-effective, most efficient way of doing it? And just because we do something today doesn't mean we should be doing it in perpetuity, and that it needs to continue to be status quo. We talk internally, again, at the department level, and we talked about, internally creating maybe evaluation committees where we're going out to the departments and we're looking at, different efficiencies. Sometimes you get the best ideas from people that are on the front line, that are actually implementing and doing the work. So we talked about creating this year in the budget internally these groups that would go out and look at, how do you continue to provide high level of service, and how do you do it in the most cost effective way? So I guess to answer your question, and we're looking at merit, we're looking at the gain sharing, which is or is not maybe illegal, maybe it's something under a
Yeah,
different
I
name.
think it might be. I mean, the state has a program for their employees as well, and it's been highly successful. Jimmy Patron had spoken about it. That's how I learned about it. But I think, like, I don't know. I worry about the culture here. I think they're working as hard as they can. They've got a lot of workload on their plate. They've been here a long time. I can see it wears on people not to get merit increases. And I want to help them get there again, because I think that everybody is driven by doing a great job. If there's money at the end of the rainbow, other than the COLA, but how do we get there and get our budget in line? And so I feel like we need to work harder with staff to say, how do you think we can also help us get to these efficiencies and help you get, your momentum back and get merit increases and all of that while we're gaining, reserves. So just bringing them into the process would help, somehow. But we talked about it last year, but we didn't really do it. So how do we get there? And that may not be the direction the board wants to go, but I feel like getting them back into acceptable. I've seen the salaries here, getting them back into acceptable salaries and merit increases, but also tying that to, our budget and saving us money and finding efficiencies, whether you're doing time studies in your department and finding ways that someone else could work another job in addition, because they don't work a full-time job, things like that need to be done. But
Yeah, and each department budget, every time they come and we prepare the budget, every new item they want to increase the budget by has to come as a decision unit.
Yeah.
And then all these decision units get weighted, and then Heidi would approve whatever is more beneficial for the county. So the budget only goes up by these items, and each of these items is reviewed and approved. So it's not just an automatic increase. So also whatever's left over from these budgets do come back as a cash carry forward, and would feed some of these items that you were concerned about. So that, from our side, does happen.
yeah, I just,
You ever challenge the department heads to come up with a decision unit that saves money? Bring a decision unit to the table that says, look, if we do this,
They have
save
come up with ideas.
$10,000.
Yeah, they have come up with ideas. It's not a decision unit. It's just come up with ideas of recommendation. We can do this better. And there's been some investment on different tools to actually do that.
Do you see much of it?
Say that
Do
again.
you see much of that that happening? Or is it,
Not much, but it has happened.
it goes back to, which I don't want to propose this, but it goes back to zero-based budgeting. What'd you do last year? And do you really need to do that? Do you really need to do that, or spend that much money on that particular item? Do you need to do that or not? I always worry that people don't do that. And if you can force it on people by going to something like a zero-based budget, but that's painful. That's real painful to do that. But it should be the managers, the line managers, that's something they should be looking at every year. What did I spend last year? How effective was it? Do I really need to do this time? Or can I go up to the assistant county manager and say, here's 10 grand back. I don't need it this year. because I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to spend as much money. So,
Right, and those come back. Things that, behind the scenes, the way we manage the budget and create the budget, there is a lot of those conversations that you just outlined there. That happens a lot. And some of the department directors might be frustrated with us when we tell them, you can't buy that, or we're not going to approve that decision unit. It happens a lot to Heidi and I. So it does happen. Those conversations do take place.
So I think what we learned in the last meeting that we had with budget is that we're just not going to be like our sister counties in terms of how big their budget is. And that has to do with our, the valuations of housing here, the amount of exemptions, because we have an older population. So the senior exemptions, so they just have larger budgets, our sister counties. And the only way to get there is to inflict, because we're already at over 8 on our millage. So the only way to get there is to start inflicting all these MTSUs. And then I think the board was pretty clear that nobody wanted to do a lot of that. So we're kind of, this is our budget, this is it. And so we create a lot of deferred, like she said, the past administrations, we have a lot of deferred maintenance that needs to be done. But, how do we get there? This is our budget. This is what we have without creating new taxes. So we're going to have to depend upon staff just as much as ourselves to get there. But what scares me the most out of this entire strategic plan is that we can't hit the very reserves that we need in the 3/12. And so we have a lot of asks that come in front of us, and they always feel like they're the most important thing. But, to me, and I said this last time, which is we're creating a lot of new capital projects that we probably should take a look at again before we create them. And that's the kind of things like staff, do we really need this? Because we want to do what you ask us to do, but at the same time, it's shorting all the important things that we need to focus on, including the most important, which is reserves.
I remember the conversation having with my daughter. Is it a want or a need?
Yeah.
I remember those discussions.
I want to also, mention that the finance department does a great job of trying to get these reserves back in place by pulling from all these different, little pots that don't get used. So they start, like the operating reserve will start in green this year. If we take a pulse check right now, it will be green. So it's not like you see it on the last year. The 312s, it's very hard to get to 312s. So we've been able to get close to the 212 number. For that reason, we still have to mark it as red because we're not getting to that 312. That's a lot of money because every time the budget increases, 312 is a much bigger number. And then we have all these different events on the beach that start pulling money out. So, and that's why that 312 is there for. So to get a green on that 312 is going to be very hard. However, to get a green on the operating reserves, you already have it today. It's just what you assign it for as we move forward. The last thing I wanted to say is that I just, summarized this in probably 10 or 15 minutes. There's a lot of work behind the scenes that department directors and all the other employees in the county that are putting forward to get to the level that we're today. This is the first time that this county has been able to have a strategic plan that we're actually measuring the output and presenting to the board. So it's a big leap from where we were before to where we are today. And it's thanks the majority is the people that are behind working and making this county be, productive and be providing the services that residents need and require.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, just one maybe slightly different aspect of what we're talking about. I agree totally that it's good that what we're doing and so forth, and we got to keep prioritizing a lot of things we do. But I point out that right now, this year is the last year of the ARPA funding that we came in. The national government printed a lot of money, and we've had high inflation rates that have kind of automatically increased salaries, even though I know it's just keeping up with inflation. Still, if you're an employee, if you're getting a 6% raise as opposed to a 1%, no matter what the inflation rate is, it still seems like you're getting more money. So I think we're at a point, I think we got one more year of pretty good times, but the chickens are going to come home to roost here in the next 2 or 3 years as inflation rates drop back down and the government is willing to just print more and more money. I think we're all in government, whether it's at the local level, state, national, we're going to have to tighten the belts. And I think we've got some shocks coming in the next couple of years when we look at the budget and how to account for all this inflation and a lot of money coming around. And then you've got to continue to meet those budget requirements that have been established by what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years.
And I'll just, add that I will concur that all the work we've done to date is helpful in analyzing the operations and the goals that we've set. I think we'll take a look at the red ones in our board and funding priorities coming up. We'll put a halt on some of those funding issues until we get down to that item. And I'll hold off on some of the other ones till we talk about funding priorities, because a lot of this is leading that way. And I appreciate the work put into the online, your transparency
Dashboard, yeah.
window, because that's a lot of information for the public. We've got to strategically kind of get that word out a little bit more as we start adding more and more to it. But that's a big step. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the ARPA-funded project review and discussion.
Thank you. As you recall, the COVID-19 stimulus package, or the American Rescue Plan, ended up taking about 1.9 trillion economic stimulus money back into the state, local, tribal governments. So when we looked at our impact, this is what the two allocations represent with Flagler County. So we took in over a 2-year period, the 22,844,000. We had established early on some projects. As you recall, there was an interim rule, and then there was the final rule. When we were looking at this, during the interim rule, it was limited to support of public health efforts. It was used to replace lost public sector revenue. And in support of vital public services, it also talked about providing premium pay for essential workers, invest in building, whether it was maintaining or upgrading water and sewer. It also allowed for broadband, being able to have people that could access health care was a huge challenge, that and education. So a lot of focus went on those initiatives, but then when you ended up having the final rule expanded to include some of your infrastructure roadways as an allowable expense. It also put a huge focus on affordable housing. And so I wanted to show you, these are the projects that we initially had, the 22 million. The ones in green are complete. The second one down, which was the Whispering Meadows, it was related to mental health. That project went away. Funding for that project ended up getting moved into the Malacompra Road Canal improvement. It was an agenda item that went in front of the board. It's at the bottom of the screen because you can use it for stormwater related activities. So it seemed at the time that it was an allowable expense. It's used as a grant match for land management for maintenance of that canal. Potentially, we may have some other funding sources for that project as we move forward. But at this time, this is as it stands right now. These are the projects that we have remaining for ARPA. I don't know if anybody's got any comments or questions. If you want, I'll just start from the top. Willow Woods, that was for the water project. Initially, we looked at water and sewer. It's cost prohibitive to be able to provide sewer, so it's really going to be a water project. That's through an interlocal that we have with the city of Palm Coast. We did a town hall recently with the folks out there. Palm Coast has a contractor under contract now, and they anticipate starting next month. It's a 270-day term. They think they'll get it done rather quickly, that they're not going to need all of that time. I mentioned the Whispering Meadows. That's the one that went away. The next 4 are all complete. That was the lost revenue, the COVID expenditure reimbursement, the mental health relocation, That's the former Bunnell Library where Flagler Access Center, the public-private partnership with SMA, took over the Bunnell Library, and so we had to temporarily fund the Bunnell Library's rent. We were only able to do that for a short period of time, so you have some remaining monies left in that project. And then the FGUA water treatment improvements, those have been complete. We've got the Malacompra Bings sewer connection. That is tied to another legislative appropriation that we had gotten to provide that backbone. Out on the Barrier Island, that's another partnership with Palm Coast where the design is complete. They've got bids going out in January, so they're hoping to award that sometime the beginning of next year. The the network Office 365 upgrades, that was complete, and the money that you see remaining unspent will pay for subscriptions and updates during the next couple years that we're able to continue to use that funding. Health Department dental expansion, that project is going extremely well. The invoices are coming in. I'm not sure if it's 100% complete yet, but that money will be completely spent. Broadband initiative, that's another one going extremely well. We haven't been invoiced, therefore we haven't spent the $1 million. Stormwater master plan, you've seen that come before you a couple times. The final plan is anticipated to be brought to you sometime in January. Any remaining funding that we've got left in that project after they do the actual plan will be used to implement some of those stormwater improvements that they recommend. Then we've got the tax collector drive-through. That was an item that had been identified at the Flagler Beach office. I'm not sure if it's still needed or not. It has not been started. And then we've got, like I said, the Malacompra drainage canal improvement there. And that was, money is being used for grant match on other funding. I think the project might have been over $1 million, and this was part of a match. I don't know if anybody has any questions of these.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, just, it's a little confusing on the unspent to me. You know, you start with 22.8, and actuals, we've spent 14, and we have 8.8, but some of that 8.8 is really allocated. It's not really money. I guess the number I'd be interested in of the unspent money, how much is actually available for
That's the next
additional
slide.
or additional projects, that kind of thing?
It'll be the next slide. So if you don't have any specific to the projects, it's actually the next slide.
That was a good question. I had
It was
the-
a good question.
I had the same question.
They already.
So seems to be a popular question, so it's funny that we have that next. This is a look at all of the projects as they stand right now. When we're looking at it, you've got the 305 in the COVID expenditures, and then you've got the remaining on the mental health relocation displacement. That was for the Bunnell Library. I highlighted the tax collector drive-through only because when we went through the initial, early on, the interim final rule, you had limitations on how you could spend it. Now that that has opened up and you can use it for other things, such as maybe roadways or investments into affordable housing, it has us taking a look at it and questioning, is it still needed? This improvement was going to be a drive-up window for Flagler Beach on a facility where we rent. We don't own the building. I don't know if the foot traffic warrants spending that kind of money for that type of investment on a building that we don't own. So I say that because if you look at the funding in those three, it's about 241,000, a little bit over 241,000. That could be reallocated and used for something else. I say all that because I want to talk about the next item, which is affordable housing, and how can we potentially use that funding to bring in an element of affordable housing now that that's part of the final rule. It wasn't part of the interim when we created this list, but certainly there is some value there. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about this or if you'd like me just to continue on with the affordable housing piece.
Now, we'll know soon, it looks like on the Malacompra Bing sewer, once bids come in, there could be additional savings or cost increases there. So we'll go on to the next one if nobody else has any questions.
Okay. So looking at affordable housing, and I know Devry's here from staff, and she's really well versed on this, so she helped me put together some of this information. In looking at the information provided by Schimberg Center for Housing Studies, here's a look at the Flagler County housing data points. So right now, 85% of our housing inventory is single-family detached housing. It's probably not a surprise. It's your typical, probably your Palm Coast mix of housing. 21% of Flagler County households are renters. You've got approximately 53% of the county's housing units are 20 years or older. And then you've got another 26% of units that are 40 years or older. When you look at a summary of what the SHIP program offers, and it's the State Housing Initiatives Partnership, the purpose of the funding really is to expand and preserve housing. And it's also to further the housing element of our comp plan. We're currently going through a comp plan rewrite, but the housing department or division works hand in hand with growth management to really hone in on some of those housing elements. Flagler County has received $1.4 million in SHIP funding from the state. That's for the state fiscal year that started July 1, so roughly about 5-6 months ago. Out of that 1.4 million, you've got a little over $1 million that has to be used for home preservation or creation, like construction activities, could be rehab, roof replacement, or it can be used for home buyer assistance for newly constructed homes. Prior to 2021, the SHIP funding had been somewhat unpredictable, but now it appears that the allocations are recurring. The amount is based on the state collection of doc stamps for real estate. Although the doc stamps, you've got more and more people, I think, that are coming, maybe paying cash, that they're not recording as many in doc stamps. That seemed to be an issue that we had when we were meeting with the clerk's office on the development of their budget, that they're seeing a reduction in some of those fees that come through. And it was largely for people that aren't maybe taking out mortgages and having to go through the, I guess, what would be like the normal channels. So they are seeing a decrease in doc stamps, but it is an allocation formula and it is based on population. So we do anticipate, though, as the county grows in population, that the county's allocation will continue to grow as well. But we are seeing a little bump with the number of folks that are coming, maybe paying cash. And then the other thing that plays into it is the higher real estate costs and higher sales. It would equal the higher allocation because you're paying doc stamps on that value of the home. The other thing is to comment on is that the state and local fiscal recovery funds under ARPA, that local governments are encouraged to use those funds to address housing. And then I mentioned it when we talked about ARPA, but in that final rule, local governments may use the ARPA funding for development costs or to produce permanently affordable housing units. So I say all of that just kind of as a preface to looking at affordable housing in the strategic plan. I know Jorge talked about this kind of in high level. There are actually 5 different objectives of this goal, which falls under economic vitality. These are the 3 that I really wanted to focus on and highlight and discuss in a little bit more detail. So under goal 4, when we talk about exploring affordable workforce, attainable housing, I know we've done a lot of work with redoing our ordinance, and we've talked about offering some form of incentive. So looking at the strategic plan and working with staff, trying to determine what is the best use of maybe some of our funds and how can we kill two birds with one stone. Yes, the money's available and it is for this purpose, but it's also tied to our strategic plan. So when we look at this and we're talking about developing options for affordable workforce housing through a public-private partnership, we're talking about incentives to expand housing options, and then talking about the use of SHIP funds to provide incentives, to be able to have affordable homeownership and/or multifamily housing. So as we start going through this, I wanted to show you, these are some of the current initiatives that are being offered by housing. As I mentioned before, the Health and Human Services, the Housing Division is working collaboratively with Growth Management to make sure that the programs align to the growth management goals and to facilitate our AHAC because they review the development incentives. I know that our growth management staff had noted that local governments don't necessarily have the capacity to force the production of affordable housing units, but we can encourage it through incentives. And that's why I really wanted to talk about the incentive portion. We do preserve current inventory of housing through SHIP mortgages. We offer that 15-year lien. Or green building. We also do storm resiliency for rehab or roof replacement. We work with hardening homes through hazard mitigation, hardening the homes, making them a little stronger so that the folks don't receive the same impacts. And then we work at updating that local housing assistance plan to encourage rental development. Some of the current fund strategies are really for home rehabilitation. It is that roof replacement. It's the home buyer assistance with the down payment, and then also making it so that it's senior barrier free. So making modifications to the home that allow some of our residents to age in place and to be able to stay in their home. So it does allow for some of those modifications. But what staff wanted to bring forward for your consideration was really a proposed initiative that potentially could use a portion of the remaining ARPA funds along with a portion of SHIP funds. And the proposed initiative is in support of what our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is recommending. It is also tied to our strategic plan, where we could use a combination of those two funds to have the board consider the creation of a public-private partnership. It would be a development incentive of $500,000. Staff, if approved, staff would work with the Florida Housing Coalition on the creation of what we call an RSQ, or a request for statement of qualifications, from interested parties, where we would then enter into a contract with that developer for affordable housing project in our community. So we would then, kind of outline what our expectations were, what those deliverables look like. It would be tied to number of units, something of that nature. But I don't know if it's something the board would like to consider, but we could certainly utilize a portion of the SHIP funds in addition to some of the ARPA funds. We have about $330,000 in SHIP funds that we could set aside for this, and then marry it up with $170,000 out of the ARPA funds. If you recall, I think it was 241 was what we had remaining if we looked at those three items. So we wanted to bring that forward for discussion, see what your thoughts are. We have internally been meeting, and I know our staff had been meeting with the state folks at the State Housing Coalition to kind of see what other communities are doing. I know in Broward County, there's a huge article where they had gotten a much larger share of ARPA funds, and they had used, I think it was like $102 million on affordable housing projects in their community. This would be the first. It is tied to our strategic plan. I don't know of any other government entity in our county that is currently using their funding, their ARPA funding for this, but wanted to bring it forward to the board to see what their thoughts are.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
would a project like this also be eligible for federal funding? Because there's a lot of that out there for affordable housing. Would that roll in on something like this?
When you're saying federal funding, not funding we receive, but maybe available to them,
to the developer, yeah.
I would imagine you could probably commingle the source of different funds, yes.
Commissioner Sullivan, yes, sir.
Uh,
You done, Greg?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Couple of questions and then a comment. Last year, the state legislature agreed to a thing called Live Local funding. So is any of the SHIP funding we're talking about here right now, is that part of that funding or not?
I don't believe so, but I'd ask Devry if,
that's-
she's
that's
probably the
another
expert in
source.
SHIP, so. I don't believe it is. I believe that this is just our allocation of SHIP. It's not part of the Live Local. The challenge that we have is being able to spend the money, and you have to be able to spend it. And so like right now, even though it hadn't been consistent, I believe we're a couple years behind in spending our money, and you have a deadline of when to spend it.
Right, I'm just want to make that point. And then, because of the Live Local Act, there are a lot of relief from current regulations as far as what you can do locally, as far as property you can use, where you can put the housing, so on and so forth. So I just want to make sure we take all that into consideration. I know a lot of that still has to be worked out legally, statewide, but, so, I mean, I think there are some things there that may help, like the federal money, but this is also additional funding that's available, should be available locally, and then the relief from regulations. And this, of course, is all tied up. Anytime you say lower cost housing, it creates all kinds of political sides to it. So getting back to the consideration of a $500,000 incentive using SHIP and ARPA money, do you have something in mind specifically so we can actually spend the money?
We would develop a RSQ, and it would be competitively bid, where we would put it out, just like we do now when we're trying to procure services, where we would work with the Florida Housing Coalition to come up with that language. We need to make sure that it qualifies and meets the the qualifications for affordable housing. And then we would advertise that with, the desire to partner with somebody for development in our community.
Yeah, I mean, it can be someone who's building a bigger apartment complex, say, and if they're willing to designate a percentage of those units as lower cost housing, you can use the money, it doesn't have to be a total, every unit in the place.
Right.
So, I mean,
It would
there's-
be through that contract, I guess, I don't know what else to call it, but through that contract, that agreement that we would have, it would outline the terms, it would outline the number of units, it would define what that scope looks like. But I just don't know if the board has a desire, and that's really what I'm looking to see, is if the board had a desire for us to move forward, we would then go back to the Florida Housing Coalition and fine tune what those details look like so that it could be advertised for something that we're looking for.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Good. So I guess in further follow-up to Commissioner Sullivan's questions, what kind of multiplier do you think this could result in? I look at $500,000 and I think that's approximately 25 roofs. Or, I don't know, 25, 30 down payment assistances, if you will. Are we talking about incentive to a multifamily project that could be 100, 200 units, something like that? I don't really know how these programs work, but I'm just curious what you've seen maybe around the state and other projects that might help me understand this better.
I'd probably, not to put her on the spot, but I probably would ask Devry to talk more about, what that return looks like. We weren't thinking individual homes. We were thinking probably more multifamily, multiple units, but not, like down payment assistance. Clearly, we have money allocated for that. We
No,
were,
I'm just saying, if you equate it to that, I understand what you're talking about here is doing a from the ground up project, but how would that be much different than continuing along with roof replacement or down payment assistance? That's what I'm trying to get at here.
I think it was.
Scale wise.
I don't know scale-wise, but I think the intent was to be able to protect or have dedicated housing that was going to stay affordable, where sometimes even if it's down payment assistance and you have it covered through a term, a mortgage that rides alongside and you get debt forgiveness, if you sell it, there's no guarantee that it's going to stay affordable. It's going to continue to become maybe unaffordable to some. But I don't know if that answers what you're saying or if Devery
Mr.
excuse me,
Chairman.
has more to add.
Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, I think that kind of the bugaboo in this whole issue is getting someone to bite.
We don't know.
You know, that's the hardest, that's the unknown. Is there enough incentive for somebody to bite and say, I'll do that, I'll build that, or I'll, you know, is 500,000 enough incentive, as Don was saying, is that enough incentive to get somebody to say, oh, I'll do that? I don't know.
Mr. Sullivan.
As Chairman Dance and I were at a briefing that was organized by Northeast Florida Regional, but we had it in St. Johns County. And St. John's did use ARPA money earlier, before the Live Local Act came about. And they were able to produce a couple of units. And they did things that are very unusual. In other words, if the developer was willing to do this, they had to guarantee no increase in rent for 30 years. And resale of the units, they have restrictions on that because they don't want people, they see a low-cost unit, they come in and buy it, and then 2 years later, they sell it at a big profit. That was not, so they put a lot of incentives in there, and were able to get a couple of developers to actually build some units in, and that's next door, but they did use the ARPA money to do that as well as other. But I think a lot of I'm not looking as much as the individual is, can we get incentivize the developers and the builders to do this using funds? In other words, that's why, you know, $500,000 might build you one house if you really, you know, in this day and age. So I look at it as more, I'm thinking more incentives to the developers to do something.
That's what this is for. The 500,000
okay,
is
I
an incentive
wasn't-
to a
okay.
developer, not an individual, like a single family person. It was for
Right.
a developer to be able to have that housing available long-term. As far as the details of what that contract would look like, certainly we would have to work with the Housing Coalition to come up with that language.
Right.
Use them as a resource because this isn't something new. We don't know who's interested until we put it out there. We may put it out there and have nobody interested, but is the board willing to have staff even invest time in looking at it to see what's out there? It would still have to come back in front of the board for your consideration and approval of a contract with somebody in a viable project, if we can even get one. It's just, you know,
Well, let's, we've put out the master plan, the PUD for affordable housing, which as a first step, we haven't been able to get anybody to bite. But it was strategic in that it offered a lot of incentives and flexibility for development. This is kind of like the next step in creating an incentive pool using funds that are available through ARPA and through the SHIP funding that we have. So it's not coming from general revenue. I'm not sure what $500,000 would put out there. You know, all this is going to cost us really is a little bit of staff time and some negotiations with Florida Housing to organize those parameters. It'll be, you know, whatever those are to meet the requirements of percentage of the units. But it's, you know, it seems like without using general funds, an opportunity to another step to see if someone will bite. We even have some vacant property potentially that could be thrown into the mix, but Commissioner
No, I
O'Brien.
think you make good points, and I would support, you know, that, as you said, not the crazy amount of staff time to put it out there and see what comes back in possible projects. I would just also say that if we don't have a lot of opportunity or response, then we need to get that money out there, because Lord knows we have an acute situation in the community in terms of, you talked about it in your prior slide of, as far as older housing stock that needs rehab, and we have no shortage of aging in place seniors, low income seniors, and families that could use the help. So
Commissioner Pennington.
To Chair Dance's point, this 170,000 dollars in ARPA's coming out of the 240, correct? That we said would be, we still have some Malacompra out to bid. So it might come in higher. We may need these ARPA funds for Malacompra. So this would be contingent, this idea, upon ensuring that we
Until we get that
You're
bid in.
talking
get that
about
bid
the,
in, right?
the Malacompra Canal? Is that what you're
Yeah, I
talking
think it
about?
was. I think it showed it's out to bid. I'm sorry, it's a couple slides back. I think it's January 2024, maybe before we know.
I was looking at the bid for, is that the Malacompra Bings?
being
You're talking
sewer-
about
yeah,
the
sewer.
utilities.
Yeah, we have two out there. We have the
Okay,
sewer
so
project
We would have
and,
to ensure
yeah.
that we've got that covered when
Yeah.
the bid, before we allocate this ARPA out
Well,
to it.
you have other money, though, related to that. You have your legislative appropriation money that's plugging that project as well, with the idea that it was going to go as far north as it possibly could. It needed to start at Jungle Hut and
Right,
go up
but we don't-
Malacompra. And then you have legislative money. I don't remember off the top of my head if it was 10 million or
started
8
at 8
million
million.
maybe.
It was 8 million. they
8
started with.
million.
Yeah.
That would then tag on to that project going north. The Malacompra Canal project, we possibly have other funding available that's related to hurricane relief, where they would do mitigation projects. So there's like other pots of money potentially that could come in. It wouldn't take the entire amount, and the 170 that you would be using towards this is probably a drop in the bucket on a utility project that's probably going to be 50 to 100 million by the time you're done.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
some following up on Commissioner Sullivan's comment. I think if we do go look at this, there's a phrase you see in the literature on some of this. It's called permanently affordable housing. And that's what you're talking about. And so if we do this and we get into this water, that's kind of a phrase or an idea that we need to kind of keep in mind. It's permanently
The only way they were
affordable.
able to do
Yeah,
it
it's the only way we
sometimes.
can do this. Yeah.
But I had one other.
Yes, sir.
comment. This, it's probably not connected, but if we think it's not a problem, think about what we've been discussing at boards where we don't have a lot of stuff we can do about it. The people at Bulow RV Park. Essentially, people not being able to stay there for a whole bunch of different reasons, but there is a problem in the county that would be nice if we could address it and maybe help situations. I don't think there's any way to connect those two with this particular money, but maybe there is. I mean, that's an active problem where there are deadlines and people are having to leave their homes and not have a place to live. I'm not saying it's connected, but there is a problem in the county, and it would be nice to, and that was the whole live local thing, was to if there are ordinances and rules standing in the way, that legislation can be used to overcome those types of situations. So I just mentioned.
Yeah, it is funny that we're wrestling with this affordable housing and then we're about to kick a bunch of people out of affordable housing.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we're not kicking anybody out. I just want to
Oh,
clarify.
I know that we're not, but we're good. It looks like if we don't do something, that affordable housing there is going to go away. So,
So I'll move on if we're done talking about this one. Oops.
Before we move on, was there anything else that you wanted to, guidance that we want to give the administrator on this item or other things to look at before we move past?
I think it's fair to go look at it. I think that's fair.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to spend some staff time to further evaluate this. Okay.
When you say further evaluate it, you're talking about developing the RSQ, working with Housing Coalition, just so we're clear.
Take a look at it. Yeah.
You had consensus.
Okay.
I know before we move on, I didn't ask for public comment. I know we've got a member of the AHAC. If it's okay, before we move on, I'll open up for public comment on the Affordable Housing Initiative. Just state your name. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dance. Valerie Clymer. I have been a resident of the county and the city of Palm Coast since 1998. Seen a few changes around here. I am currently on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. And just so that you all understand, homelessness is a problem here. We have teachers and others living in cars. I have a teacher that I'm talking to, pays $950 a month to have one bedroom, and so she could have a private bathroom. She washes her dishes in her tub. Could you imagine doing that? With the average salary, and I'm just using $48,000 because it's a nice, easy number. When we're talking about housing expense, under HUD, no more than 30% of your income can be spent on housing. That's $1,200. Who can afford that? That's not even available here in our area. We need to try to continue to work with the LHAP and the Live Local Act. Builders are willing to build. I have met with Anna Marie. So we do have that opportunity there. They just need to know, what is the roadmap? How do they get here? How do they access funds? What do we need from them? They are willing. They only may need to do 10 or 20% of their development. This does not need to be an all or nothing thing, but we do need to start somewhere before we lose our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, the tradespeople that are building these homes. If you go down by Harley Davidson and look and see how many people are living in their cars, and some of them are our teachers. So we need to do something, and we really need to think hard about this. And if anybody wants help, I will volunteer to try to come up with a plan, but it does need to be a more permanent plan. And I think that we can come up with it. We just need to think about it, because a $300,000 home is $2,400 to $2,700 a month. So that means that 2 county or city employees can't even afford to buy that. So we need something here to keep our residents here. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anybody else that wanted to speak on the subject? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Under this topic, we're going to talk about board policies and funding priorities.
I still have more to go.
Oh, okay.
So this is a look at the tentative budget calendar for fiscal year 25 budget. As it's presented, we're using the same template and format that we used last year. We are open to any changes in the schedule and look for any input that you have. When you're looking at it, the dates in blue are internal public dates, external public dates, and then the green are internal, where we're meeting with staff, department heads, things like that. It's the same as last year, it's just new dates.
You've got meeting with commissioners in January starting off. Are you going to start requesting appointment times?
We will, after today. And if we need to tweak any of these dates, I didn't want to go ahead and book them without talking to you first to see if you wanted to stick with the same schedule. But this is what we did last year. We actually started, I think, on the 5th or 6th last year. I know we anticipated doing it on the 4th. We were cut a little short, so.
At first glance, I don't have any suggestions that differ.
Okay.
Anybody else?
My only, just if we're setting up meetings with dates up front with the commissioners, just make sure it's deconflicted with our other
Absolutely.
BOCC schedule. I would think you could just do that.
We will.
Yeah.
Okay, so this follows the same budget process workflow that we used last year. Right now, we're in the pre-budget phase. And we'll move into the right now, we're going to be looking at current policies and plans, determining if they need to be updated, looking for board's input related to strategic plan, our financial policy, capital improvement, rolling stock replacement. And then we'll discuss the need for any budget retreats and/or workshops, and continue to update the budget forecasting as new information becomes available to us. And then we'll move into budget development, where we're going to start the budget kickoff. And that's when we meet with the department directors. This is where we talked about doing something a little bit differently this year, where we would go out to the individual departments, talk to the frontline staff, getting their input on ideas and ways that we can potentially reduce expenditures. And we're going to be sharing our budget message and timeline for upcoming budget milestones, provide direction on the creation of the fiscal year 25 budget. And again, as we've done every year, any requests that exceed the budget limits are addressed through budget decision units, which get submitted by the departments in a priority order so that we could then internally vet them, evaluate them, rank them before being considered for part of the inclusion into the budget. So this is just kind of the flow of how it all works. Plenty of opportunity for citizen engagement. We'll have plenty of opportunities to come public with the board and get board approval and input as we move forward. So looking forward at establishing board priorities. As I mentioned before, we do want to start this process early. So in addition to the strategic plan, the 4 focus areas that we have, we're also considering any prior board decisions or commitments. We're also looking for any other guidance that you can provide as we move forward with the development of the upcoming budget. Some of these are consistent from prior years, but these are some budgetary considerations that may reduce or assist with controlling funding moving forward, and whether or not there's any current services being provided on our side that need to be reduced or should be reduced. I don't know if there's anything at the board level that they wanted to identify. And then looking at creation of an internal replacement fund for capital equipment. Last year, we looked at doing some lease equipment. I don't know if we want to continue that route or create more of an internal replacement fund similar to what we do for our insurance. Also looking at, lowering the millage rate and what does that look like? So really, these are some of the things that we've identified. We've talked previously about eliminating some of those legacy expenditures that aren't aligned with our strategic plan. They're not aligned with Florida state statute as far as responsibilities of county government. Talk about outsourcing of selected services, possibly consolidation of services. I don't know if there's an opportunity to do either one of those last 2 items, but certainly I think everything's on the table for consideration from staff's perspective.
So as we head into the budget, right? If we come together kind of with some type of idea on a mission that we want to achieve for this year's budget, is we've got to give staff some rules to follow. So are we, what do we want to put out there as far as tax relief, lower millage? Is there, we've looked at the strategic plan. Did anything stick out in the strategic plan that we want to put focus on? Is it, there was one, the red was in building reserves adequately, and like Mr. Salinas said, it's the first part is within working range. The second one is probably a long-term goal. We've talked about, and some of them are on here, of spending in the funds on upkeep. Do we want to put a focus on? And I know we're going to look at one of the items that we is on the agenda is the is the park master plan, which identifies some priority levels of parks that need immediate attention. So if I'd like to get some feedback on some how we can give the administrator some direction on these early steps of budget creation. Commissioner
Go
Pennington.
first. Does anybody want to go first? So I think and I think maybe I want to talk to you about this, as I was pretty clear early on that, and I think it's important because it falls into the budget and how it's structured this year, is that I'd like to really look again at the Daytona North Special Assessment and going away and treating that area with their own tax dollars and just giving them the general service that the other areas like that have. So that would impact our budget. But I would like to, whether that has to be a workshop or a discussion, would like to make sure we talk about that. I think I hear Heidi say this a lot, and I hear it from staff, and I think there's some frustration, is what kind of county do we want to be? Heidi says it a lot, and I think it's just important to say, as a commissioner, what my intentions are, which we've talked a lot about MTSUs and MBSUs and all of those things. And, I think I know from my stance, I need to be clear, my priorities are to grow the reserves and to work on deferred maintenance, and work towards reducing the millage. I would only ever be open to an MTSU or if it had something very specific in mind, like beach erosion or something. I don't want to create unnecessary new tax burdens. I think that's important just to tell you that, so you know that where I come from as a commissioner, growing the reserves, not limiting the new capital projects that we spend money towards, so that we can work on the deferred maintenance. And real important to me is stormwater projects. I think that those are items we know that are deferred, and they're really, really starting to come out, especially out in the West, and have impacts to the residents. So growing the reserves, getting us out of the red on the 312s, dropping the special assessment in Daytona North, or at least discussing that further and seeing what that would look like. Stormwater projects, deferred maintenance, and working towards reduction of millage. And I know that you gentlemen have been here a long time, so you're very good at knowing what that number needs to look like. And it seems like it comes out later in the budget process, what we want to reduce. So maybe it would help to give a ballpark figure for that, if it's possible. So those are some of my thoughts.
Commissioner Hanson.
I think I would second just about everything she said. I really agree with doing away with the Daytona North tax. I think that's not necessary, just not necessary. But one of the things that kind of strikes me about our going forward is quality of life and for our residents, and what we do to either enhance that or detract from it, I think has a lot to say with how we get whether we're successful or not in the budgetary process. I do think that although Ms. Pennington is against the MSTU or MSBU, I think we're going to have to do something for beach and dune. We're going to have to do something, and we need to do it this year. So I think that in my mind, that has to be on the plate. I agree with the stormwater issue because we deal with that every time a new developer comes in. We have to deal with that. So it's just good to understand how it all works in the county. Where does the water go? Conversion of septic into sewer I think is critical, especially on the barrier island. But countywide, we need to do that. We're deferring maintenance, I think, too much. I think that's an issue we need to get out on the table and take a hard look at that. So.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything anybody said so far, but, and this is very elementary kindergarten kind of stuff for the budget, but I would like to see a statement put in it, and I know it's been done before, but the fact that so many people in this city who own homes have homestead exemption and save our homes situation. The millage rate has almost no effect on the amount of money they pay. And in fact, if you look at what you paid actually, if you have a house here, and what you paid in taxes 20 years ago, you've had homestead exemption the whole time, your taxes have actually gone down a little, not up, when you look at inflation rate and all that kind of thing. So I would like some kind of a statement as we get into this that lays out what's the percentage of people in Flagler County that have the benefit of homestead exemption? And make some points about what I just said, that if you don't start there, people have no idea what you're talking about. And we want to reduce the millage rate, but the fact that it really doesn't do much for people who are on homestead exemption, I'll leave it at that, because I agree with everything else. But I do think we need a little educational, again, people forget about these things, just the base we start from. When you say the millage rate, well, that's fine, but if you're a homestead exemption, it's really not affecting you at all.
Yeah, but if you buy a new home,
Oh, I
or
agree.
you're buying, it's a resale,
Of course.
it's staggering.
And
It's
businesses-
staggering.
And businesses don't get the homestead
I know.
exemption. But I'll leave it alone there, but my overall feelings about taxes and so forth. But at some point, we've got to face up to the homestead exemption, safe homes situation, and how it affects how much money you can take in the way of taxes.
Commissioner O'Brien, did you want to add anything? I will say, right, so part of this discussion is trying to figure out where we're going to go. We've had, with rising property values, we've had incremental reductions in millage, which does affect a lot of different areas. And even if you consider, because rental homes are not going to be homesteaded, so
agree.
those are affected and affect a certain population as well with increased rent. So a lot of this stuff is going to, right, Daytona Special Assessment is going to be a hit to the general fund. Deferred millages, increased spending. Stormwater projects will be increased spending. Reduction in millage will reduce the general revenue. So these things are competing. So that's why we have to kind of set that priority on where we want to start off discussion, so we can see, like, if everybody's in an agreement that we, because at one point, right, we've seen the swings where we've had high property values, and with, on the horizon with interest rates higher, are we going to see reductions in values, which put a strain on us then having to increase millage if property values start to go down or go negative? That has that swing effect on millage. So, again, I think we have deferred maintenance for way too long. I think if we look at the Daytona Special Assessment, I think that was on our project to be able to study that some more. And I'd be looking at maybe an incremental reduction potentially, if everybody's going to be in agreement with getting away with that. And then, right, we've got the Parks Master Plan and the Stormwater Master Plan. If we don't implement some type of funding or set asides for those, the plan really was not worth spending money on. So if we can kind of give some base, are we looking at least some reductions in taxpayer funds for millage? Do we want to give some guidance on a reduction, that we want to continue to see reduction in the millage, whether it be a 1/10, which is or more? And then do we want to see some projects come back where we can, do we give the direction to bring projects to us that where maintenance has been deferred for way too long? There looks like there's some funding for the basis for the beginning of stormwater projects, but when that plan when we have the final list of that, I don't know exactly how much money. I know that's a big item as well as the dunes, but are we in agreement that we want to continue to bring millage down?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so do we want to target that or just give that
Well, point oh one is $1 million, right?
right?
Roughly $1 million. So that's a good start.
Okay, so that's gonna, and so then we're also gonna have to look at, one of the things is legacy expenses, which have to be, again, kind of stepped in because we're affecting budgets and have to give people some advance notice if we're gonna start reducing some budgets. We have, I think one of the largest ones is in our contribution to school resource officers is a lot
Huge,
of,
yeah.
a big dollar, but we've continued that on, and it's continued to grow. Our share of that has continued to grow, and I'm not sure if the school district is getting additional monies from the state or not. But that's a very important community program.
And now would be a good time to discuss with the school board.
So I
The
mean,
shares.
we can start
The
those,
shares, yeah.
at least start to understand better the constraints that the school district is under
Right.
and the expenses with the resource deputies. Commissioner
more.
Sullivan.
You know, it's just this coming year, we're really going to start to see the impact, the impact fees that we readjusted. Remember, we had a big discussion of that. Now we have impact fees coming in that we didn't have before. And maybe just add how significant is that funding? Where is it helping, hurting? Does it help out the overall budget? And that kind of thing. So that applies to me.
And other things we've touched on, if we can give the administrator some guidance, I like the idea of departments getting some of the savings back to them, and I know there's the administrator touched on a merit increase, especially if there's reductions in department budgets or efficiencies. But I think the idea that that staff can get a merit, again, we incorporate merit increases back into staff salaries would be an important morale boost as well. And so if there's like a consensus on looking at how we reinvest savings from departments and also investing in that merit increase, if we can accomplish some of that within these parameters. Any other guidance that anybody wants to give?
So,
Well, maybe, the windfall that we get sometimes when the prediction of the growth rate is not accurate and we get more money than we thought we were going to get. I think that's our money, the county's money. We should hold on to that and not distribute that to the other departments or the other.
Well, at one point, we had a discussion with the sheriff's office about any savings from the budget year being reinvested into the sheriff.
Right.
And I think that's still an important step. I don't know where we got sidetracked on that, but is that something that we can start again as a discussion?
I mean, certainly it's out there every year. I don't know that we got anything back or a significant amount back at year end.
Okay.
Typically, sometimes it gets eaten up depending on the timing of storms, where I know maybe it wasn't this year, it was the previous year where we thought that we would have money coming back, but it ended up being utilized, I think, during storm recovery, with the understanding that, I mean, eventually the money does come back to you if it's storm related, and if we get reimbursed through FEMA. But we work like that with all of the constitutionals typically. But it is also a way for the board to build their reserves, because previously the board has not clearly defined or allocated a dollar amount that they want to see the reserves grow each year. So we typically pull together whatever remaining money we have at the end of the year and we throw it into reserves. That's just what staff does at their level. So I don't know if it, just taking notes, and I think that this is great. Daytona North Service District, though, I just wanted to clarify, right now, they, if we were to eliminate the front foot assessment, what would be the makeup, or would they only receive what they get for gas tax? Because it's not currently part of the general fund, unless you're suggesting that we add it to the general fund. I'm just trying to determine what's going to come off the list.
I think that's probably one of those workshop items. We're going to have to come back and look at a workable plan for Daytona North. Because I think there's still, my opinion from last year was there's still some potential legality issues on the way that was originally created and what it's morphed into.
I don't disagree. And certainly the county attorney had weighed in on it the last time. I'm just trying to think clear direction so that we know the steps moving forward. Growing the reserves, paying for the deferred maintenance, also reducing the millage, setting aside money for stormwater, septic to sewer, implementing some of the park master plans, looking at the legacy expenditures primarily with the school board, impact fees. I mean, largely the growth has been in probably Palm Coast, so we may not see those impact fees as far as looking at the dollar amounts. But I think when you look at us presenting a balanced budget, something's going to have to give, whether it's a reduction in the level of service, because the money has to be coming from somewhere. So I don't know if you're talking about recapturing or cutting, reducing other budgets, or where is I guess trying to get to the bottom line of where would this additional money come from to put it into all of these things.
Well, I don't think we're looking for everything in 1 year, so it's definitely going to be a long-term process to get some of these things done. So maybe not even in year one, but if there's a plan moving forward, at least that's the guidance right now. So small steps in deferred maintenance, and in the parks master plan. I think we'll just have to look at that at the first steps.
I would just want to say, I think also, as for the, I think we need to find out from the clerk. I know that the state's going to be giving more funds back to the clerk this year. It's and every year going forward, they're supposed to be able to keep more of their budget. So I don't know if we know what kind of impact that'll have on his office, but I like to Chair's point. I think what we're saying is, we want to handle deferred maintenance, look at storm and park, and just baby steps into it rather than going into large new capital projects and spending money there. It's just how do we do that without impacting, health and public safety? Because I think you talked about quality of life. Our residents are really clear. They don't want to deal with stormwater issues any longer. They're overwhelmed with it. They don't want us to impact public safety and health. They're very clear. They want this level of service they get out of that. And they want us to look at, fixing what we already have as opposing to creating new. So I think that's the direction here, while keeping taxes low, which is difficult. And I completely understand that. But if it's done, just in small drabs here, we'll get a lot of what they want done. So that's
Commissioner Sullivan.
Just one more word. Consolidation. There may be some ways, we did, a few years back, the Benel Fire Department, we consolidated with them. In the long run, does that save money, or is it just more efficient? So are there examples maybe, so I just say consolidation of services, if there's ways of combining to improve efficiency would be.
I think there are, but they're hot button items.
I know.
You're going to raise the hackles, and everybody's going to, because you could say, well, let the sheriff take over all law enforcement in the whole county. But you're going to get, people are going to get
we're talking
excited about that.
We're trying to come up with ways.
I
but
know.
We still have spending we have to do. We have to do
Yeah.
capital projects. We have to do a lot of things. At some point, you can't worry about hurting people's feelings.
Yeah.
Just have to do the right thing. Consolidation, I'd say.
All right, so first stab at conversations on budget. We, based on your schedule, we're going to have individual meetings in the beginning of January, so we'll be able to further clarify some of our personal intentions with the administrator, and then come back together after that. And you'll have some numbers or some talking points probably by that, so we'll have a little more information to look at.
And I think maybe, Mr. Chairman, that when we have those meetings, if you have any good ideas about reducing,
Absolutely.
to bring those to the table too. That's tough. That's tough.
If we're going to move on, here's a list of options to consider. This isn't the first time that you've seen them, but they will require formal notification to Department of Revenue by the end of March. Staff has compiled a list of potential items for the board's consideration. We're working on bringing this to you at your January meeting. And what happens is if this isn't addressed prior to December 31st, we still have a window with Department of Revenue that we need to provide this to them by the end of March. But because it will be after the December 31st date, we enter into an interlocal agreement with the property appraiser and tax collector to collect these funds. Many counties follow this process. I don't know how familiar you are with Nassau or if you've read any articles recently about them, but I think they've been doing it since like 1990, where they go in front of their board at the end of the year in December and they list out a bunch of things, kind of like a list of items that potentially they may look to use. It doesn't mean that they're using them, but they just, through their attorney's advice, they put it out there so that the option is out there as they're working on the budget. So we were looking at kind of mimicking when we looked at, what kind of county do you want to be and how do you move Flagler forward? To your point of, when you look at homestead or you look at properties that maybe are tax exempt, whether they're government, maybe they're hospitals, churches, where you're not getting that tax base, there is other forms of being able to get revenue out of folks that don't currently pay, where that you could provide relief to the residents that live here year round, or property owners that live in our community. So when we're looking at trying to come up with alternative ways, right now, we rely too heavy on the millage rate and your property tax value. And so if you have a downturn in the economy, you will not have a alternative source that you're able to utilize. Your only recourse at that point is to raise millage. And so that's what we're trying to avoid by exploring other options to diversify the revenue so that you can reduce the millage rate on your property and collect it in a different form. When we looked at all of our sister communities and how did they get to where they are today and look at and explore the options that they all use some form of this. So we wanted to bring this in front of you in January for board's consideration and really talk through the item. And some maybe work out better than others, whether it's an assessment for the beaches, a dedicated millage, or maybe it's a taxing district or whatever option we're going to choose. But just wanted to put it out there again as far as options that are available to us. And then really just the next steps are going to be outlining the board's priorities. We look forward to meeting with you in January to get further clarification and direction. And then just really introduce greater stability in financial planning and budgeting process. So.
Commissioner Bennigan.
So Ms. Petito, back to the previous slide, do you need us to address some of that before the 31st of December, correct? So it would be best that we address what we would like to see back, or?
We can't, because you have to do a notice and you have a resolution that needs to be advertised. We've missed the window for December 31st.
Oh, yeah.
So we
Okay.
still have until the end of March. So we're working with the legal department to get that advertised and noticed for sometime in January. I know last week, Sean, maybe even Al, we're in on a phone call with a firm that represents Nassau County. They're probably one of the larger law firms in Florida that deal with this type of diversification, I guess, in funding revenues, as far as the, the pitfalls, the challenges, what you can and cannot do. So I know that they participated in a phone call last week to kind of pick their brain on what works, what doesn't work, ahead of our meeting in January.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'll open for public comment. If anybody wanted to approach the board on budget issues or what you've heard today. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment, and we'll go to our last item, which is the George Washington Carver Community Center interlocal agreement. We have that on the, as a consent item tonight, but wanted to make sure we had enough time to talk about the interlocal. And Mr. Salinas is going to present that.
Good afternoon again, Chair and board members. I wanted to provide a little bit of a timeline on how we got to today on the ILA. So during late spring, the school board, my understanding was to start to work on the ILA. We had a staff member from the board side, Michael Lagasse, started to work with them on the ILA. During that time, I did see some email traffic as early as June 2nd, where he was working, participating with the school board and trying to work on this ILA. On June 27, the school board invited Heidi, myself, and Chief Williams was there. At that time, interim superintendent Moore was there. Dave Friedman was there. So we went over to just kind of talk about how can we help move this ILA forward. And we just had a very high-level conversation. The next day, on July 28th, the school board came over to our administrative offices with a recommendation and proposal that since the building is owned by the county, that it would be better for the board side to manage the ILA process. And Heidi agreed to that and assigned it to me to work with the team on this item. So on August 14th, we had our initial meeting that was our BOCC staff, school staff, and sheriff's staff kind of working through this process of doing the first update under our, side. Then we sent that first draft update to the school board for their first meeting that the George Washington Carver Community Advisory Board had. That was on August 17th. That was the first time that it was presented to them. It was a little bit of a hiccup during that meeting because the version that we sent was not the version that was provided. So we had to have a lot of conversation back and forth to try to provide an update on that particular first draft that we created as a first formal team managed by the board side. During that meeting, the George Washington Carver Community Center Advisory Board assigned Mr. Ragsdale to be their voice on our ILA working group. So now the working group has what we call an ILA working group, which the members were from the BOCC side. Heidi, myself, and Sean participated on many of the meetings. From the school board was David Friedman, Joshua Walker, and now Superintendent Moore participated in some of the meetings. From the sheriff's office was Chief Williams and Deputy Erlerson, Artie, was part of the meetings. From the city of Bunnell, Chief Brannon participated on our meetings. And then from the Carver Advisory Board, Mr. Ragsdale was representing the advisory board. We also decided to invite a member of the community, so we invited Mr. Josie to be part of these meetings. So we had multiple meetings, and there was also subgroup meetings between the sheriff's office and the school board to try to decipher some of the, detailed work so they can come back to our ILA working group meeting and try to provide updates and feedback so we can start incorporating and try to advance this document forward. On November 13, after all these meetings that we had, we came up with the final version, which is 1.4. November 13, 1.4 was the final version. And that was a version that was sent to the George Washington Carver Community Center Advisory Board for their review and consideration. During that meeting at 10 o'clock on the 27th, they approved and provided the vote of support. So then that document came back to us. And then on the 29th, the ILA working group went over the information, gather any additional feedback, and then we decided that I actually asked if we had their support, given that now we have all these pieces in place, if we have their support to take it to our respective boards. And the answer was yes. We also talked about a due date. The due date was by the end of December, we should have an ILA in place so we can start the year with a new ILA and move forward. So there's all these meetings that took place. Now, fast forward on Friday, December 15th at 3:17 p.m., we received an email from the school board that there was some additional changes that Ms. Gavin, the board school attorney, wanted to make. I replied back that we had all these opportunities to make these changes and that in order to maintain the integrity of the process, we wanted to make sure that we were reviewing the ILA that had November 13 version 1.4 as the one that was provided to all the respective boards. And the board, during the board meetings and presentation of this ILA, they can provide feedback and perhaps we can take it back. But the time to provide feedback and change this, and the one that we agreed to present was this version. So I just wanted to provide the history so you're all on the same page as we were during this process. I'll open up for any questions.
So,
Commissioner Hanson.
I'm sorry.
So how big were the changes the school board wanted to make? I mean, I don't think we should make any changes, but I'm just asking.
So there were some additions in red text. Those are minor. I think the ones that seem a little bit more concerning to me and perhaps to other team members is some of the things that took a lot of time to get to that point. There was work done by the sheriff's office and the school board staff to, how they're going to manage the process, how they're going to add programs, and how those programs are going to be put in the schedule. And some of those were crossover. So I didn't have an opportunity to get an update on that. I know that Heidi was trying to communicate with the school board, but we didn't have an opportunity, since this was done last Friday, to come up with an answer for that.
Commissioner Sullivan.
So were the changes that are coming in from the school board, are they the result of a meeting the school board had, or are they just changes that now the staff of the school board is recommending?
Well, the staff from the school board was part of this process.
Right.
So everybody had an opportunity to provide feedback. These
That's-
changes, my understanding, are coming from Ms. Gavin, the school board attorney.
But she had a shot at this.
That's our point, I think.
Yeah,
They
I
had
think-
a shot at the staff level like everybody else.
That is correct.
And as a result of all that, we have this. Now it's supposed to be going back to each of the parties for a final signature. We being one, the Board of County Commissioners being one of those.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So did she participate when the sheriff and the school board met and decided what they wanted in here? Was she part of that?
Ms. Gavin was not part of our meetings, but staff member from the school board was part of the meetings. And my understanding is that, like, for example, we would take our document to our attorney, in this case was Sean, to review, make sure that our part was covered. So we did that. That was completed from our side. I just don't know what conversation happened between the school board and the school board attorney.
Well, the obvious question is, where was she from November 13th to Friday, December 14th, whatever it was? There's a month there. Where was she? What was she doing? I did have one question on the PAL. I've kind of always maintained that the PAL shouldn't charge for what they do. And the wording in here says that all participants in PAL, nobody will be turned away from PAL for financial reasons. That's the way I read this. So I think we solved that.
That is correct,
that
yeah.
issue.
That was one of the concerns that we heard as feedback, and I know that Artie worked with PAL and the sheriff's office and made that recommendation that no one would be turned around or no one would
That's good.
not
That's a
participate.
win. That's a
Right.
win, I
Right.
think. Yeah, that's good.
Commissioner Penningham?
Yeah, I wanted to go over just a couple of things, make sure that I'm on board with the current agreement. So the school board's responsible for the overall management of the facility.
Right.
We gave it completely to them. It's joint with PAL for scheduling within the facility. The school board, we gave them the opportunity, we allowed them to utilize any assistance of other partners with programming, including nonprofits, private vendors, so they could bring in anything else, any other partners that they would like. PAL, like you said, is regardless of race, religion, or financial situation, has to accept them into the program. And the county will continue to pay facility, utility, maintenance, I think the cleaning, custodial cost, and $97,000 of salary for the school board employee that oversees it. In addition to that, we did the addition on the building, and we know that it's in the capital improvements for a new bathroom. So it's costing us $162,000 roughly last year, I think, in funding, just our part on this.
Yeah,
Benell, the city of Benell is going to be $10,000. It's a 5-year term, but we can terminate it at any time without cause, giving a 1-year notice. So it's not, we're not set in stone on it. But I thought when I read through it, it was a very fair agreement. And we pay the bulk of the agreement. And so it just seems to me difficult for me to swallow that we're being held up on something that we own and that we pay the bulk of it, that we're being held up by the school board. So at some point here, I have a difficult time with someone telling us how we should manage our asset and our building and our money and everything else. So I thought it was a very fair agreement that was worked up with PAL.
and the sheriff was actually through PAL going to bring, not only provide staff resources to be there with the kids, but also they were through PAL going to bring in something close to $100,000 through donations, provide additional sports
Right.
that they don't exist today.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, everything always boils back down to communication. So between when we received that email on Friday and now, have we gotten any further explanation, or has anyone from our side reached out to the district to find out what the
I
story
know that
is?
Heidi has reached out once or twice, right, Heidi?
Reached out twice, haven't heard anything.
So I've got a couple questions within the plan. And I know this has been an ongoing issue, so, and that Sean's been working on, which is proof that he's been part of it going on continually. But explain to me the comment that is out there is about PAL and in the agreement. So there's an issue brewing with the legalities of an interlocal that includes PAL, and why PAL is, why it's acceptable to have PAL tied with the sheriff's office within the agreement. And is it, since they're a nonprofit, is that?
Before I respond to that, could I just go back and explain a little bit more too?
Absolutely.
Miss Gavin contacted me last week. I believe it was Friday. As she advised me, she was under the impression her staff had provided those edits some time ago. And I said, no, actually, we didn't get anything. And even their own document that they published for their own workshop that they're having tomorrow had the agreed upon version without those edits. My understanding is it has since been updated on their website to incorporate those edits. Again, most of them weren't too objectionable. Maybe some probably needed to be worked out if we were even trying to entertain them, but it was the timing was the tough thing. I mean, they came at the last minute. Now, to get back to the legalities, I spoke to this at a previous workshop here with you all, and the agreement is with the sheriff. PAL is not signing this agreement. However, they are certainly part of it. They're mentioned in here. They're providing services on behalf of the sheriff. At the end of the day, the sheriff is the one signing and on the hook for their activities in terms of liability. This is a lawful agreement. It's an interlocal with the public agencies. PAL is a third-party obligor that works on behalf of the sheriff under this agreement. But at the end of the day, the agreement is with the sheriff. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just wanted to make that clear because I had been, that issue had been raised and just wanted to make sure in case that issue is again raised tonight. But, and I will just, the responsibilities are laid out pretty clearly as the one part where PAL is brought in is with the shared responsibility with the school board to manage the use of the gym. And if there's any discrepancies, and right, there's also a part in the back that talks about if there are disagreements between the two and there needs to be a settlement, there's a part in there where I can't pick it out again.
5E, I think it is 5E.
But there is a discussion about how those settlements will be resolved.
Yeah, 5E. Mr. Chair, the diagram that you see in attachment A, also, that was worked out between sheriff staff and school board staff, and that's how they agreed upon which area each group would manage or work on, and also what are the joint areas that they will work within the Carver Center. So what we see on page 14 was work that was performed between the sheriff's staff and the school board staff to come up with this, because this was also an area that we were having a little bit of a challenge. But they worked as a subgroup and came back to us as the ILA working group with these recommendations that they agreed upon.
And based on the prior agreement, is our contribution consistent with what we've spent in the past, or is this an increase from the school board, from the county side?
I believe it's an increase.
Okay. Do we know how much approximately, or?
Stand by, we'll have to pull up the old one.
All right. We can.
Yeah. Yeah, basically the utility expenditures are continuing to go up, and those have been continue to increase. The support of a staff member over there on the school board, it's the $97,000 that Commissioner Pennington mentioned is funded through BOCC.
Okay, but that's new, right? That wasn't.
No, that was there.
That was there. Okay.
That was there, yeah.
All right. Okay, just curious. Again, we talked about the things that aren't statutorily required by the county, but these are important community issues that where we take the lead and work with our other governmental agencies, to satisfy the needs of the community. Does anybody else have any questions within the agreement?
Nope.
All right, seeing none.
Sorry.
Yes, sir,
I
go
just
ahead.
want to emphasize that when we left our ILA working group meeting on the 29th, everybody was in agreement that this was the final version that we take to our boards.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because I did ask, are we okay taking this to the board on that meeting on the 29th? Everybody said yes. So this is the one that we took and gave to everybody to take to their respective boards to get signatures on.
I guess I have one.
Sure, Commissioner Sullivan.
And that is, you're never going to have a perfect document. And I don't think there's anything here that could not be changed if there's an obvious flaw in there, something like that. But you've worked on it a long time. There was agreement in the working group. And it's time to get on with it and not just keep kicking around, because it's going to make things better. It's a good thing. The George Washington Community Center is a good thing, and we want to keep it going and have it work.
And we just finished a nice addition.
That we
Finished a
paid
nice
for.
edition.
Yeah.
And what the sheriff is providing is beneficial for in terms of sports. It's beneficial for the kids over there.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right, I'll open it up for public comment if anybody wanted to speak on the Carver Community Center interlocal agreement. Thank you, sir. Please state your name.
My name's Thomas Hudson. I'm at 140 Habersham, Flagler Beach, unincorporated. Mr. Dance, commission members. I had my speech already put up here, but then when I listened to the county attorney over here, they just threw it all out. For one, I'd ask him, the county sheriff works for the county. I believe he's a county sheriff. Are you going to have an interlocal agreement with the county sheriff to run the Carver Center? That I didn't have in my notes here, but a couple that I do have and I want to point out to you is the county administrator said that the sheriff doesn't have control of the Carver Center. In plain language, just simple reading of this document, the sheriff does gain control of the Carver Center. And some of the stakeholders that were part of the agreement to begin with and the Carver Foundation were excluded from this negotiations that they had now. I didn't know that they had a meeting on the 14th. So some of the reasons that I object to this and request you to reject this at this time is it's not in the best interest of the residents of Flagler County. It's not based on equal funding. You have revenue coming in of 130 plus 5, I think, and then the expenses of 162.99. You're $30,000 short from the get-go of this amount. The Board of County Commissioners, if you assign this agreement again, you're getting yourself right back into the position which you had, similar to the Captain's Barbecue. And I don't think we want to go there. The other thing, the county administrator back on August 7th in Flagler Live made a statement that the Powell would bring in 150 some $1,000. I don't see any of that money reflected in this agreement here for the funds. What you're going to end up with is the county paying 100% of this interlocal agreement as time goes. The other new thing that come about since I wrote my notes here is the Big Elephant wants to create their own entertainment complex for $90 million. If that goes through and the county commits itself for this interlocal agreement here for 5 years or longer, you're going to end up paying 100% of it. The people come in with a contract, or when we moved our people from out of town to come in, out of state to play, we go with the modern facilities. So I don't think any of those leagues or teams are going to come in when you have a $90 million facility in our Carver Center. I'm sure Carver Center is nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other speakers? I'll introduce you, Sheriff Staley.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, Commissioners. As you've heard from staff, first let me mention to you that Heidi and RA have done a phenomenal job, and so has your assistant attorney, trying to work through all the competing interests. And I have met with the NAACP president. We do not want to take over the Carver Gym. We understand the historical value of that gym. What we want to do is help kids not be generational criminals or drug dealers. And you do that where the kids are. And that's what we're trying to do. So what we bring to the table, which hasn't been there before, is 2 full-time employees. One's a deputy, one's a civilian professional support, to the tune of about $200,000 a year if you look at the total cost of that. We have done fundraising with a community group for this project, over $100,000, slightly over $100,000. They have committed to do an annual tournament, the men's group, if you will, that they anticipate would be an additional $50,000 to help for operating costs. Of course, that's not guaranteed. That's a fundraiser, but the $100,000 is in the bank and has to be used for this. The original plan was to build a building. I'd rather get kids engaged than build another structure. And so that was the partnership design and what the ILA is approved for or designed to do. Sheriff's PAL only exists because it's a 501c3, so that when people like the $100,000 we just raised get a tax deduction. It also allows us, by associating with National PAL, to get very cheap insurance for the sports activities. So all the stuff that you've heard out there is not accurate at all. All we want to do is save kids, get them involved in sports. Studies have shown that sports keep kids out of trouble. That's all we want to do. And to do that, we need a partnership with all the entities. There's 3, the school district, the sheriff's office, and the Board of County Commissioners. That's it. There's no hidden motive. I had to hear on a radio station that just the other day from somebody from Detroit was on the radio being interviewed by a local radio person about how this was done in Detroit, and they took the land and sold it and made millions of dollars off of it. That has no bearing in this case. It's apples and oranges. Nothing's going to change on who owns that property and who is handling it. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Anybody? City of Benel also?
And my understanding is they're engaged in for it. In fact, there have been some premature stuff done with them that didn't get there.
I was just, all the entities that you mentioned, just wanted to add the City of
Correct.
Benel's in there and the Carver Foundation contributing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public speakers? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Is there anybody that wanted to speak on any of the items today? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Any board member comments before we adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
We've got another meeting coming.